Do you want to unleash your inner power and heal your past wounds? Do you want to learn the secrets of Celtic wisdom and magic? Do you want to transform your life and align with your true purpose? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you need to listen to Practically Magic, the podcast that shows you how to use ancient healing in a modern way. Join me, Courtney Earle, a self-proclaimed witch, healer, and Celtic priestess, and let me guide you through the dark cauldron of your subconscious and help you emerge with a new vision of yourself. Practically Magic is more than just a podcast. It is a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Tune in every week and get ready to experience massive healing, balance, and peace for your soul and body. Listen on Ride the Wave Media.
Hey, it's just Blaine and Bex here with the best podcast in Utah.
That's right. It's Radio Daybreak, a show highlighting the people, businesses, and events that make Daybreak, Salt Lake City, and Utah one of the most majestic places around.
Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and never miss an episode of the best podcast in Utah, Radio Daybreak.
The following presentation is a production of Ride the Wave Media.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of Vibing the Apocalypse. If I sound super, super sexy, it's because I've been smitten with the apocalypse cold, and I'm doing my best to nurse myself back to health. But it is day 1,414 of the apocalypse, so I hope you are all staying well and healthy. It's a bright, sunny day in January in Utah right now, which is how you know that we are just knee deep in the apocalypse, because this is not what January is supposed to be looking like in Utah. I'm very excited for today's episode. Today's going to be my very first guest, and I'm very excited for this particular guest because she is one of my favorite artists that I've ever met, and she has a podcast where she talks to creatives about art. It's called Artifice, and the craft of making art, and I think that art and the apocalypse are two very important. They go hand in hand because we need to be able to, as we're rebuilding this world, we're going to need a lot of artists. Welcome to Vibing the Apocalypse, my friend, Emily Merrill.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
Emily, I'm so excited that you're here. I want to jump right into this conversation. And the first place that I want to start is I want you to just have a little bit to just introduce yourself and to talk a little bit about what your background with thinking of the apocalypse is. Like when you were a kid, Did you grow up thinking about the apocalypse? Were you prepared for the apocalypse in any way? Just give us your kind of apocalypse history.
Yes. Okay. So I grew up mainstream LDS. So thinking about the apocalypse, actually, I think the truth is I didn't really hear the word apocalypse until I was maybe a little bit older, and there were like a bunch of apocalypse movies coming out at the same time. There was Deep Impact, which is like a comet hitting the Earth movie. Elijah Wood is in it. And Armageddon. Yeah. Yeah, especially teenage Elijah Wood. It was a whole thing. Pre-Frodo.
Pre-Frodo Elijah Wood.
Yes.
That's some very young Elijah. That's 12-year-old Elijah Wood.
Yes. So I remember asking my parents about it and them saying, well, that's like, we talked about the second coming of Jesus. But
Yeah.
I didn't know that there was supposed to be scary shit happening at the same time.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that until I was maybe in my early teens.
When you learned that there was going to be scary shit, how did that impact? Like, how did you respond to that?
I think, Ben, if I'm being honest, the truth is that I just thought I was going to be one of the people that didn't have any scary shit happen.
Oh, because you were righteous.
Right.
I remember.
Isn't that kind of probably how you felt too?
Well, no. So that's maybe a little bit different. Is that I heard about the scary shit that was going to be happening, and I was like, finally something interesting, because I just remember the predominant emotional experience of my childhood was boredom. Yeah. I was just bored all the time.
Yeah.
And so the idea of the apocalypse actually was quite exciting to me. This is a true story. So for me, the first moment that I remember where I remember thinking, okay, now we're in the apocalypse, like now it's beginning, was 9/11, right? When 9/11 happens, we wake up the morning of 9/11 and we like hear it on the radios, and we had a little compound school and we canceled compound school, and we went to just a neighbor's house. Like I think it was someone's uncle or aunt who wasn't a member of the AUB. So they had a TV. And we like went to their house and we just watched 9/11 on television all day, which is apparently what everyone else did, which is wild.
Yes.
It's wild to me that that's what we did and that adults let children just watch reruns of people jumping out of buildings all day.
All day. Me too. Yep. I was in junior high. I was in, I think, the 7th grade. Yep. I remember that for sure.
Yeah.
Wars and
which
rumors
is just
of wars. I remember
wars and
hearing
rumors of
this.
wars. Yeah.
Rumors of wars.
And just incredibly psychologically scarring too. That's the one thing that kind of makes me believe, because as a former polygamist, I generally run away from conspiracy theories. If someone has a conspiracy theory, I'm like, that's probably not true.
Get skeptical. Yeah.
I'm pretty skeptical. My skeptical radar is pretty hard.
Skepticism.
But with 9/11, the one thing that kind of makes me think that maybe there was a little bit of an insight is like, why was everyone playing it, just pumping it into, just on a nervous system level for the entire country to just be so traumatized?
I feel like the adults just couldn't turn it off, and they were like, well, kids are here, so they're watching it.
Yeah.
I feel like it was just like coping. Like what else is there to do but stay?
I think because I remember seeing my parents and seeing like the adults around me, and they were just locked onto it. So I think you're probably right.
Transfixed.
But for me, that experience, I remember that happening, and I was like, finally, some shit's about to go down. I'm like, finally, all of this crazy shit that we've been talking about happening is going to happen, so we can start to do things.
I was scared of that. I definitely thought there would be some scary, scary times pre-second coming. Like it would get really bad. But I guess I didn't really think of that as the apocalypse as much as just that's what the world will be. But hey, I had another thought, if it's an okay time to share it, which is maybe an important part of like kind of me beginning to think about what I actually think is happening is when I was in 10th grade, I joined the speech and debate team. And I was doing policy debate, which is debating policies. And every year, America chooses like a theme. And all of the kids and high school students and college students all over the country who are in policy debate on the same theme. And that first year that I was on the speech and debate team, our topic was ocean policy. And so I started learning about climate change in 2003. Which was definitely before we were
before it was popular.
Yes. Yeah. And I was reading like peer-reviewed papers and learning about the pH changing in the ocean and just what was happening with pollution, and would come home and talk about it with my parents, and they would be like, don't believe everything you read. And I'd be like, this is written by people with PhDs.
It is wild to me how, because my parents have a similar, and again, our parents are on different levels of
cult.
Of cult in Mormonism, but they're both in there. They're both very dedicated to their age, into their individual versions of it. Yes. And my parents felt the same way about climate change when it started to trickle down into the world that we were living in, where they were just very much, don't trust the scientists, don't listen to these. I remember them saying things like it was, they love to blame it on the communists, which I feel like is very 1950s, but that's the world that they're living in. But it always blows my mind because especially in the Mormon world, right? Because in the Mormon world, you literally believe that this American land, which by the way, I want to pause there because I want to tell you this because I think you'll like it. I don't like calling America America.
You told really me actually. Wait. Turtle
Turtles.
Island.
Yeah. Calling America America really bugs me because it's this dude, Amerigo Vespucci, who just came here and walked around and then wrote his name on it. Like, to me, America is the height of calling where we're at. America is like the height of colonialism.
Yes, 100%.
Like it ignores the fact that for tens of thousands of years, there were people here. And so the natives, or not all of the natives, because to say the natives is to ignore the fact that there were tons of different.
Some of the indigenous peoples,
specifically the Iroquois, who I think are just rad for everything that I learn about them. They're so cool. They would call this place Turtle Island because if you look, and this is what's weird to me, is if you look at the North American continent from way high up, it looks like a turtle. Like it's got its hands, it's got its shell, it's got its, and the thing that's even more interesting is it looks like that turtle is diving.
Wow.
Right? It looks like that turtle is going underwater. And that to me is like a great metaphor for climate change where like ocean levels are rising and we're going underwater. Yeah. And it blew my mind because Mormons believe that, and a lot of Americans believe that this place is like a chosen land and that God brought them here specifically, right? Like there's so much of that in the American mythos. And it blows my mind that you could believe that God brought you somewhere and that God gave you this super special land and that you wouldn't have to like take care of it.
Yeah. Right.
That you wouldn't have to like keep it clean.
You were saying, your parents took like this is like a communism thing. And my parents were very much, well, this is bleeding heart stuff. And I remember always thinking like throughout my childhood, like, why don't we all want to be like that? Isn't that kind of what Jesus taught? But
right.
I think for me, like that kind of bleeding heart thing is just how I found myself in art. That's definitely like a through line for me personally.
Yeah, I think that there's something, just that bleeding heart, because to me that speaks to a soul of compassion.
Yeah.
And I remember that it does seem it seems like a very Christian in the best sense of Christianity, right? I think that if you take the Christian myth and you really apply it in the way that Jesus intended, right? The actual Jesus who came and was like, hey,
Christian
give all your money.
philosophy.
Right. Then you get that. And it's sad to me that so many, because the Christian myth is such a beautiful myth. Yeah. And there's so much opportunity for compassion and care in it. And I remember that for me, my sort of soft and tender heart was a big thing that was, well, I would actually credit that as the dominant thing that eventually pushed me out of Mormonism.
Same.
We're
both like that, and we're also both very curious, which I think that's why we're artists.
Yeah.
Sorry,
yeah, and I think that you have to be able to. I am too. I think that you have to be able to approach the world with a sense of compassion, especially today, right? Especially as the world falls to pieces and everything gets broken. I think that it's going to be. There's two different routes that you could go down. Like route number one is you could go down a righteous route and you could say, look, this is happening because people were wicked and the wicked people are going to be punished and the righteous people are going to be saved. And I'm going to be a righteous person. Mm-hmm. And you could go down that path. And I think if you go down that path, I think that path ends in a really dark place.
Yeah. That path ends in the apocalypse in every sense of the word.
Right. That path ends in like the darkest apocalypse. Or you can go down this path of compassion, which is, look, we are all equally culpable for the world that we live in. We all created this world together, and we're all going to suffer the consequences of this world that we created together. Yeah. And so together we can try to find a way to make a world that takes care of everyone.
Right. Yep. I'm so there. I think like you, I've been there since I was a little kid in whatever way my worldview would allow. And as curiosity has brought me to greater knowledge, that worldview expands to include quite a bit more.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Let's kind of shift gears and let's talk a little bit about I want to get into art and I want to get into the apocalypse and I want to get into what you think the role of art is in this current apocalypse.
Yeah. Okay, well, I have notes. I've been thinking about this all week. And I'll just tell you, so I don't need to read my notes, but I was thinking a lot and I I have basically 3 categories of things that I think art can do for us in
Okay.
the apocalypse.
I love this.
One is what you were saying before about human connection and compassion and using art as like a means toward understanding each other. So I'm ready to talk about that at length. The other is just like creativity and art as like resourcefulness, innovation, problem solving,
Ooh, yeah.
which we absolutely need. And then
Yeah.
the third, which is maybe like a bit of a combination of the two, is art toward social movement and cultural shifts and broad cultural like ideology and movement shifts.
Ooh, I love this. Oh my God. I love the way your brain works. And I'm so excited that you did exactly just that. So I love all 3 of those categories. The way that I'd like to invite you to approach this conversation then is because part of what I want to do with this podcast is I want this podcast to be a resource for people to start to live and behave differently in the apocalypse based on what they learn here. And I would really, and I know that you're probably going to go this way anyway because you're a teacher and that's the energy that you bring. But I would really like to invite you to step into that sort of powerful place of art. That's something that's been in you've been in that world for a long time. You've really paid the price to be legitimate in that area, right? And to have what you say matter. And I would love to have you just educate us on how we can use art in the apocalypse to make the world a better place.
Hell yeah. Well, may I open with a quote?
Yes, please.
So this quote is from Lily Wachowski, who's one of the makers of The Matrix. And I heard this quote on a documentary called Disclosure. It's on Netflix, and it's about trans people in media. But she says, I love this, and I think you're going to love it too. She says, there's something that is funny about the magic trick of creating something out of thin air and then using that thing as this handhold to pull yourself forward.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
I love it so much too. And it really feels like what we're doing as artists. There's many ways that art like functions or doesn't function. Not all art needs to be functional, of course. But I think so much art that is made is like this. It's the artist is creating a thing that they themselves and others can use to pull them forward. And I think part of the reason that when I heard this quote, it rang so true to me is I have a podcast where I interview artists, and I so shockingly frequently hear from artists something along the lines of, I didn't really know what the work was about until I finished it. Like they're creating this thing that kind of helps them to like reach their next kind of stage of evolution.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, like maybe the next place that I go is like the last big project that I made, The Hallowed Wide, which you have seen and heard.
I have seen. Yeah, it was lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, so The Hallowed Wide it's a manifesto. It's a philosophy. I wrote it at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was thinking so much and just feeling like heartbreak about what was going on in the world, how much division there was, how that division was manifesting in my family. I had broken contact with my dad like right around that same time. And I wrote this piece, this body of work that is like a step-by-step guide for human connection. And that's just kind of one example. These things exist all over our culture. People writing books, people making films that kind of teach us new ways to communicate with each other, teach us empathy. Yeah.
And I love this idea too that as artists, as we're creating those works, that we don't really need to know the full journey. Going back to the Wachowski quote, like that it's a handhold to just pull us along to the next thing. And especially during apocalyptic times, especially during right now when nobody knows what's going to happen, right? We have no idea what the world will look like a year from now, 10 years from now. All we know is that it will look radically different from how it looks right now. And if we can, as artists, create little things that pull us into the next and then into the next and then into the next, that's really all we need is to find the next, because everything is we're surfing right now, right? Everything is, and all we need to be able to see is just right around the next corner. and then right around the next corner, and then right around the next corner. And so I love that idea that art can really be something that helps us do that.
Yeah, yes, and even just thinking like in these, one of my favorite ways to think about how art does this is it's a vehicle for empathy. Imagining someone else's life, imagining or a new future, but specifically as we're talking about human connection, which we absolutely need to figure out if we're going to avoid certain aspects of this apocalypse that we're headed into. Having empathy for another person really is a creative endeavor. You're imagining yourself in another person's situation and imagining what it would feel like to be that person, and that's creative. And what we're doing as like storytellers, as writers, as actors is teaching people to see another perspective. When someone creates like a cultural work, something really iconic, I know there's like different ways of thinking about this, but one thing I think about is like The Help, this movie The Help, which is really centered toward white people, but it's just this little kind of touchstone that can get someone who's not thinking about privilege at all, who can't even fit that concept in their mind remotely, to just crack open that door a little bit of what is this other experience. And just one example, but there are so many things like that that kind of lead toward these broad cultural changes.
And I love this idea too of what you said about empathy being a creative endeavor.
Yeah.
That to me, like, that really hit me, because we need so much empathy in our world right now, especially in 2024, as we careen towards what will be the most absurd presidential election of our lifetimes. Right? Where we're literally about to have an election between a dead man and a crazy man.
Yes.
And all of us have to fight over which one of those two versions of America we want, right? A version of America who's just an orange buffoon, or a version of America who doesn't know where he is or what's happening. Yeah. And that is the fight that we're going to have. And it's almost like it's designed in some way to keep us in conflict. But if we could just slow down and exercise a little bit of creativity and just try to empathically understand, if you were to think about the person that you disagree with the most, and if you were to just for a minute try to get into that person's shoes and understand, and not just their shoes of their lifetime, but their shoes and like the shoes of their generationally, right? That's part of it too. Because I'm, you mentioned that you're not speaking to your dad. I'm also currently not speaking to my dad for a similar reason. But part of that boundary that I set with my dad, it came from a place of understanding his perspective. Yeah. I don't feel a lot of anger towards my dad anymore. I've in large part, I've really forgiven and moved on from that. And part of what enabled me to do that is that I really was able to get into his shoes. I was able to see his perspective. Yeah. And once I saw his perspective, it was almost like and this is a man who was not very kind to me, right? He literally labor trafficked me. And hasn't really fully acknowledged that, right? Like, he did something that awful, and I still don't feel like he really thinks that he did anything that bad.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason why I'm like, until you acknowledge how bad that was, then we can start to have a relationship.
Right.
But for me, being able to just get into his shoes and to understand that this is a man who was born in Wyoming in like the 60s. And he was raised by a very violent dad. He was raised in a very violent religion. He was raised in a religion that told him that he was the most important thing on God's earth. And as he's lived his life, he's realized he's had to really come to terms with a couple of gnarly facts. One of which is he's actually not that important. Yeah. And
it's a rough
that is
to swallow.
That is a bitter pill to swallow when you've been told your whole life that you really matter. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that that empathetic understanding of my dad, which was a creative thing. I had to really imagine what that felt like.
Right.
Right? That doesn't mean that I don't hold that man accountable for what he does.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that I just let him do whatever he wants to and that I don't let him know when he does things that bother me. In fact, knowing who my dad is and understand that empathetic understanding of my dad makes it easier for me to hold him accountable.
Totally. I was
And it
literally
makes
just
it
talking about
easier
this
for
last
me
night.
to,
Same thing.
yeah, it makes it easier I would love to hear what you think about that, because it makes it easier for me to do those things. And I think that, I think that I think in America, we are so afraid. We're so afraid of understanding someone who's different than us, be that a trans person or a Republican or an Amish person or anything, right? We're so afraid of understanding someone who's different from us because we're worried that we'll lose ourselves in that understanding. And I think that's a pretty codependent way to look at things.
Very.
Because if true understanding of another person doesn't mean that I lose myself, it means I get to see them. And if I can, and it does require me to put myself down a pedestal, right? I can't be the most important thing in the whole world. I've got to recognize that I'm one of many.
It's the same lesson.
But go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. And I've been talking a lot. I want to get your thoughts on this. Go ahead.
Well, I also love the way your brain works. But yeah, I think it's the same lesson. It's if you want to be able to see someone empathically and to really see the bad things that this person has done have understandable ingredients. Like there can be, I can understand how this person with this set of circumstances, with this mind, with this set of skills lands here. And to see the sadness in that and to see the loss in that and not to just be like, well, this person's a bad person, piece of shit. But like,
Right.
this is a person who's dealing with trauma in specific ways. If you're going to extend that kind of thought process to someone else, you have to extend it to yourself too and realize the ways in which you are complicit in your own maladaptive behaviors, the ways in which you are capable of blind spots. It's it's a lack of certainty that is very, very difficult for humans.
Yeah. And I think very, very difficult for humans. And I think part of, maybe not easy for artists, but I think that artists, we play in that space.
100%. I
think
mean,
that
this is what I
we have to
say.
play in this
Go ahead.
space of the edges are a little bit softer.
100%. Yeah, this is what I'm always saying to my podcast guests of like, I have no illusions that artists are that creativity only exists in the arts. Artful thinking, creative thinking, it's human. It's something that it's our kind of natural state as a species. But one thing that I love about artists and that I think it's not unique to artists, but it would be difficult to find an artist who isn't doing it. Like you said, thinking about the edges, suspending disbelief, taking the mind to these other places. And it's something that we practice. It's a skill. And this is the thing that I think we need in the apocalypse. This is where I think art needs to be all of ours. And I believe that. I think like art is part of the human condition, and it's part of the kind of capitalist lie that we think art is like a hobby, or that art is this kind of non-pragmatic, whatever, entertainment kind of a thing. Art is humanity, and art is like, one thing I was talking about recently with another artist is we have this idea sometimes that there's like logical thinking and creative thinking. This seems crazy to me because what is more creative than logical thinking? Like,
right.
It's so creative to be like, where are the gaps? Where are the holes in this like thing that I'm laying out, this reasoning that I have? It's deeply creative to imagine the exception to the rule. That's an art skill.
Yeah, it totally is. And I love what you said too about everyone being artists, because I think that especially now, especially in the apocalypse, it's going to be so important for every human to really exercise that creative muscle. Because if art is one thing, it's creatively responding to the things that are available to you right here, right? As an artist, you can't make something with something that's not in front of you. So you can't be like, oh, I wish I had this other thing. No, you got what you got in front of you. And I think in some ways, In some ways, although I love professional artists, right? To be clear, like I love the high caliber of performance art, of all different kinds of art. When someone like really becomes a professional and they do it, and they like Beyonce, fucking amazing.
Yes.
And I think that we lose something as a species when we outsource art to those people. And we say, only Beyonce. I can't sing because I can't sing like Beyonce.
Right.
No, like we need everyone to be singing right now. We need everyone to be engaged in their creative, because there's something really deeply human about the creative process. And if we're not engaged in that way, in some ways we're turned off. And I think we're more susceptible to this capitalist machine that has in many ways been the thing that has driven the apocalypse, right? The reason that we are actually in, which is so funny to me sometimes, because I grow up and I think the apocalypse is happening, and then I come into the world and I'm like, oh, I guess it's not. I guess I was lied to about the apocalypse. And then a couple of years later,
Oh shit. Actually.
oh, it's actually happening. But why is it actually happening? Well, it's because we've been living so out of balance with our environments.
Yeah.
We were so out of touch with who we are and what our planet is and who each other are, that we've exploited this really good Earth to the point where she's pissed at us and she's motherfuckers. Take a step back.
Yes. Yep. Yes. Yeah. One of the things that I have written down in my notes is this idea that if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think if you're an artist, everything looks like raw material. Everything looks like something that can.
Ooh, I love that.
Yeah. Everything looks like something that can be worked on or be thought about, or it's a mindset. It really is. And for so many artists, their medium ultimately really is ideas, like whether they're a visual artist, whether they're a writer, whether they're a musician. Not always. Like sometimes the beauty of the thing is just in the thing. And I have lots of thoughts about that as well. But a lot of times our medium is ideas. And that requires, like you said, not being turned off, like just being aware, thinking of singing and dancing not as these forms of entertainment or writing or storytelling, but like just things that are like essentially part of our species. Like physiologically, what does singing do? Physiologically, what does dancing do? Physiologically, what is rhythm? What is it to tell a story? Storytelling is so impactful in our evolution because you can pack so much wisdom into a story. You don't have to say all the things. It's there. It's kind of bigger way. These are deeply creative means that have led to our evolution. And like you said, because of certain philosophies, we've stopped using them, and to our detriment.
Yeah, we've outsourced them. I can't tell you how many people I've heard say something like, "Oh, I can't sing. I'm not Beyonce," or something like that. And I'm like, I didn't ask for Beyonce.
Right. Your larynx, your instrument as a human being is
You're
one
right
of the
here.
most versatile instruments the most versatile instrument in the entire animal kingdom. You can sing.
Yeah, and the
You're
range
made to sing. Your body is designed to sing.
Just on that, the range of human expression. This was one of the things that I think was the most impactful to me when I went to Burning Man. Is I'm out at Burning Man, and one of the core tenet, or one of the because there are 10 principles of Burning Man, right, that sort of govern the way that ecosystem works, and one of them is radical self-expression. And the idea is just that whatever is inside of you that wants to express, let that thing express. And so you walk around Burning Man and you see the most wild expressions of human creativity. The most, and it's not just wild, it's like the variety of human expression. And then you come back into, just as an example, cars at Burning Man versus cars out here in the world. We have the most boring cars. They're all white, black, tan, or gray. Some of them are blue or green. A couple of them are red, but they all have 4 doors. They all have a windshield. right? Like everything about they're all exactly the same. And at Burning Man, you can have whatever kind of car, like you have a chassis, right? You have 4 wheels, and then you can put whatever you want on top. So there are cars that are like peacocks. There are cars that are witches' houses. There was a car that was a pirate ship. There was a pirate ship on a car, and they just drove it around, and you could like climb up to the top of it, right? And so I think a lot about how human creativity and expression has been stunted in the capitalist world, and also very much for me in the Mormon world, right? Where there's this cookie cutter of what you're allowed, what kind of expression is okay, what kind of expression you're allowed to express, rather than just like exercising, like you said, like your larynx is the variety of sounds that you can get to come out of your voice box is wild. It's crazy.
We've been taught to treat this like sterility, like this just absolute sterile, boring, unenriching environment and ways of expression as virtuous. That's the great lie. But we were talking about this the other day. I know we both had read Your Brain on Art. And one of my favorite things about that book was it talks a lot about how humans need enrichment. Like other animals, aesthetic environments are like critical to our mental and physical and emotional well-being. And we forget to think about like beauty as a sustainability practice. And, beauty and enrichment, like these things are, we've been sold this bill of goods. We've been sold this lie that,
we've been sold efficiency, right? We've been sold
sterile
and sterility and like Puritan. I blame it on the Puritans because it's like this very, very rigid, very strict. It works. It's functional. But where's the magic to it?
And it doesn't work. I know that's
right.
That's what you mean, but it falls completely apart. It leaves everybody depressed. No one can innovate. No one is vibrant. Like the world is, the vast majority of humans are just like reduced to this cog in a machine instead of what we are, which is some of the best. We are a brilliant species. And I know sometimes people who are talking about environmental collapse will be like, get rid of us humans, whatever. And I hear that. But also I feel like you, I love people. I think humans are miraculous.
Yeah.
And this idea that so many of us are like, we've been taught to accept and even prioritize this shitty life that's, has no color and has no innovation and has no beauty. And it's very bad.
Just what you said about how we've been reduced to this. Yeah. And I feel that so strong because we are living so far, most humans are living so far beneath our creative potential because we are in a system that says this is all we need from you. The idea that we live in a system that tells humans, hey, all we need from you is for you to go to a job every day from 9 to 5 and to do things like that's what we need from you as a species. That's gross to me. When you have a human being and all of the amazing creative things that person could do, to tell them, hey, the life that we need from you is this really limited, small life that follows this very specific track. And then at the end of it, if you're lucky, you'll get like maybe 5 or 10 years to have a hobby.
Right. And we talk to artists. I'm talking to artists all the time. I might teach artists. I am one. And people all the time are like, they talk to you like it's vanity. They talk to you like it's superfluous and it's frivolous. And one of the thoughts that I had as I was thinking about this, with talking with you, is not everybody needs to be a professional artist, like you said. But I think if we all can embrace like creativity, enrichment, creative thinking, beauty, we will find ourselves creatively and artfully in the places that are going to be the best uses of our skills. We will find the most artful, the most creative people being leaders. We will find the most creative and brilliant and innovative science minds in science. And we will
Totally.
find someone doing ballet, and there's something mystical about that.
Yeah. Or someone approaching politics as a creative act,
Yes, this is one of my
right?
favorite
Like,
questions to
oh,
ask
I would
my
kill
guests.
for an artist in politics.
Right.
Please, dear God.
I want for all of us to be artists. I really believe that. That's my ethical mission, which is why I write albums. For the listener, I don't know if we've said this, but I'm a singer. So
Yeah.
my main medium is like singing and songwriting. I write a lot of prose, I do a lot of thinking. But the medium that I get paid for is singing and songwriting. And I write works that have a moral. I feel like I'm a philosopher, and my philosophies like end up in the form of songs that I'm singing.
Yeah.
And
Hell yeah.
I'm writing about how do we all be artists? Like, how can we all incorporate artful thinking and artful doing into our lives? And that's what's in like the intro of my podcast. Like, how
And
we do that.
the thing that I think is so beautiful about where we're at right now and the specific time, space, and history that we're in right now is that as bad, like I was just looking at shit yesterday, like we're like 109 days or something into this awful humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There's still a war happening in Ukraine, and that probably over the next couple of years spills over into a global war. And the climate is just batshit crazy right now. You have America just at each other's throats over the dumbest things. In Utah here, they're still trying to get us to fight about trans bathrooms, which is the stupidest thing for us to, because nobody cares.
It's not a real, yeah.
No one cares enough to ask someone else, hey, show me your genitals before you go into this bathroom, right? Nobody cares. We do not care.
It's a red herring. It's just
It's a red herring.
distraction.
You're trying to get us to
Very
fight.
well.
And so all of that's happening. So it's crazy. It's a crazy, scary time. And I can't think of a better canvas for artists to create on.
Yeah.
Because we have so much, there's so much up in the air. There's so much that could be questioned right now. Today, we can question things that 10 years ago, you could never question.
Yeah. Right.
You can question those things today.
Oh,
And
yeah. It's completely different than it was. Oh, well, I got excited for a second there because I was just talking about this with another friend. I teach college, and when I look at just the diversity of expression in the freshman class at Utah Valley University, granted, it is a music program that I'm in. The stats are probably skewed a little, but we're still in Utah County. A lot of my students, if not most, grew up LDS. Many of them still are LDS. And they have so much more diversity of expression than I saw when I went to college for jazz studies in 2006, which I went to school in this little hippie town, and I see more diversity in the freshman class
hell yeah.
in Orem
Makes me so
in
happy.
Utah Valley University.
Yeah. That makes me so happy because I have a term that I've coined around diversity. It's called diverse immunity. And it's where you take diversity and community and you mash them together. Mm-hmm. And if you have a diverse community, what you have is you have diverse immunity, meaning that you are immune to a lot of the shocks that might come from an apocalyptic event because you have a wide variety of skill sets and experiences. Yes. And I think that as we continue to go deeper into the apocalypse, the communities because there's going to be some communities who are going to say, no, the strength for us is in having everyone exactly the same. And if we have everyone exactly the same, then we'll survive. And I think that's stupid.
Well,
because
we know it is because what happens is people they just niche down.
What happens to a monoculture? Monocultures fail all the time. What you need in nature to be healthy is you need a vibrant, diverse ecosystem. And so one of the things, like when you look at Turtle Island and you look at what happened in Turtle Island over the last 400 years, while there was tons of bad shit. Number one, let's acknowledge that. Like, all of the crazy bad shit that happened needs to be addressed and resolved. And what it's done right now, and when you look at where Turtle Island is right now, we have one of the most diverse, passionate, dedicated, and disciplined cultures in the entire world. Because for the last 200, 300 years, all over the world, everyone heard about this America thing and they were like, I got to get me some of that. Yeah. And then they came here. So now we have tons of people. And if we could just recognize how immensely valuable that diversity is in America and invest in it,
Totally.
and really lean into that and just make that of value, then oh my God, the things that would get unlocked,
Yes.
right? Because we have so literally every country on earth is represented on Turtle Island now. Yeah. And you can't say that about almost anywhere else in the world. Yeah. But every country, someone from every country is here.
And this like rugged individualism that, as Americans, we culturally love is also, it can get so nasty, but it also, if paired with like that artful creativity, would be so rad. Like people just
be so
like,
rad.
What am I doing? What am I great at? And this is one of my favorite things to think about. When we start thinking about ethics and global unrest and like all the things that need to happen, it's easy to start feeling in your own body like, well, I need to join Doctors Without Borders, or, I need to do this other thing. And it can get really depressing if you feel like, but I don't know how to do that. I'm not motivated by that. I don't know. But I think there's just room for incredible change wherever we are. I wanted to tell you a story about, I just saw this I was watching like a food documentary, as one does. And I forget the name of the restaurant, but the chef is Daniel Hum, I think. And he was the owner and the head chef at like a restaurant that was named like the top restaurant in the world in New York City. I forget the name of it. But they had their 3 Michelin stars. And this chef, he set out, he talks in the documentary about how he set out as a young man to be this peak artist. He wants to be like the world's best chef and get these Michelin stars. And then once he achieved this, or not once he'd achieved it, but just this is the timing of it, he started being aware of like how the animal food industry is ruining the planet. And right. He said he started to feel this ethical conundrum of, well, I'm running one of the best restaurants in the world. And if I can't innovate here and put a different value system on display here, how is anybody else supposed to do it? So he converted his entire menu at this restaurant to vegan.
Rad.
And he said in the interview, he said, I was prepared to lose all of our stars. Which is, it's so creative, it's so artful, it's that high ethics. And the truth is, he's still running a very expensive, like, niche restaurant. But that is the place where he is, that is the skill set he has, and this is the biggest impact that he can make. And it's still highly privileged, but there's something, I think, such a good lesson there about how
totally
we each can kind of take our skills to like the most ethical, artful end.
And we're never going to get rid of privilege, right? There always will be some level of privilege in the world. And so what we really need is we need all different strata, right? We need from top to bottom. We need a fundamental readjustment of our society to the realities that we face, right? And what I love about that story is that this was a guy who he looked at the realities and he said, oh, this is a problem. It's a problem. It's not sustainable. It's not going to we're not going to be able to keep doing this. If we keep doing it this way, we're going to continue to it's just going to get worse. So I can do something and I can make sure that this place where I'm at, that place is resilient, right? That place is renewable. And I think we're going to have to do that in every different in everyone's sphere of
Many ways as we
influence,
can. Yeah,
and
it's
as in many ways as we can.
something I've been thinking about, like I've been writing about and thinking about a lot this year, is we each really, we all, our medium is our life and our self and our body. And some of us make other things with our life and our self and our body. And some of us create ideas. Some of us are part of a team. We all do different things. But I think there's something so interesting and precious about this idea of what is the thing that only you can do? What is the thing
Yeah.
that only you can do? And so for me, one of the things that I have done is I've written a lot of art, I've written a lot of music and words and prose about my narcissistic mother. And this is like a very small thing. It's a big thing in my life, it's a small thing in the world. But there have been dozens and dozens of people who've reached out to me and said, I'm so glad that you wrote this because it helps me understand my husband better because his mother
Yeah.
did this. And that's pretty powerful in that person's life. I'm not on a Doctors Without Borders team, but those are changes that affect people's lives. And it is something that I, Emily Merrill, can do. And you're making art for the very specific community that you make art for, or some of the art you make. I'm sure I give you space to whatever, how you feel. But that's something that only you can do.
Yeah. Something that only I can do. And I also think too, I love that idea of what is it that only you can do? One, I'll pile on the value of art that exposes narcissistic mothers, right? That is a social good. Anything
Yes.
that, because and I think that's sort of part of the grand unveiling, right? There's so much. One of my favorite expressions of the apocalypse actually comes from this book. This is the Archetype Guidebook they have some cards. So there's this. This is the Apocalypsis card.
Ooh, I
Isn't that a
like it.
gorgeous card?
Yes, it is.
And it defines the apocalypse as, so it says this: apocalypsis indicates a particularly painful time, one that unfolds when two disparate dynamics occur simultaneously, pulling the psyche in seemingly opposing directions. The first is a lifting of the veil. This means truths that have been kept in the dark are revealed, seen, and unearthed. And that's the realization that an important person in your life is a narcissist is a lifting of the veil.
Yeah.
Right? Because you didn't want to see that. You didn't expect to see that. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh
shit.
yeah.
Can't unsee
Oh
it.
shit. Right? You can't unsee it. No matter how relieving it is to witness them come into the light, an element of despair and grief follows. The second dynamic is the regeneration that comes from the wreckage of the revealed truth.
Say that last part again.
The second dynamic, because the first dynamic is the lifting of the veil, right? Where you're like, oh, I see this thing. And then the second dynamic is the regeneration that comes from the wreckage of the revealed truth.
Yes. So this
And I
is
think-
something. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just I think
so
that
excited about
that regeneration, that period, that's where we're at right now in society. Is there was a truth revealed about our society with COVID, with climate change, with all these wars, all of these things are coming back. We're realizing something profoundly true about our society. And I think the thing that we're realizing is the same thing that I realized about Mormonism, which is this society has not been built to keep me safe.
Yeah.
This society has actually been built to exploit and oppress me.
Yeah.
So now with that realization, what's the regeneration?
Yeah.
But I want to hear what got you excited.
I have so many thoughts, but I think we can get stuck when, like, we talk a lot about the gut instinct and like trusting our gut. And that's something that, as artists, we talk about, like learning to trust your gut and trust your instincts. I think there's something confusing there sometimes where when we realize this devastation, when the second kind of part happens after this unveiling, and we have this kind of devastation, there's so much fear there and like disappointment and disgust and whatever that it can be so tempting to be like, this feels so bad. I will go back. I will put the veil back down.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And it can feel, like how could the right thing possibly be to like go through this horror? But yeah, that's why. So what I was gonna say is like my work, the Hallowed Wide. It's like it's a manifesto. It's like it's a philosophy that I put into a 12-song album with some visual art. The way that I lay it out is it's first I wrote a little spell, first descend, then divide, make it hallowed, make it wide. So
Yeah.
the descent is that unveiling, right? The descent is like looking at this shit and just being like, I see it. Okay, I see it. Like we have to take that plunge and it doesn't feel good. And it's very scary. And it takes a lot of creativity to teach your brain and your body how to see and feel reality. And then the divide is the descent is hard enough. The divide is that second piece that you're talking about you have to carve these things out of yourself that are maladaptive. It's extremely painful. It's devastating. It's such hard work to take out these pieces of yourself that you cannot, if you want to see the world in a different way, if you want to move about the world in a different way, if you want to be more ethical. And then there's the last two parts. But that one is the one that I got excited about that because I'm like, I'm writing about this too.
Yeah. What I love too about that process that you just described is that sort of feels like similar to the process that I described in my last episode about the phases of an apocalypse, where there's this descent and then you hit rock bottom and then it's okay, now we can rebuild. And one of the things that I think, going back to your earlier comment about make the art that only you can make, right? About show up as the way that only, what's the thing that only you can do? I think that's a really powerful idea individually. And I also think that's a really powerful idea collectively, because one of the things that I think is the most wildly fascinating about where we're at as a species and as a collective right now is that we are facing the wreckage of revealed truth and feeling all of those feelings of, I really don't want to see it. Right. I really don't want to see it. I really don't want to acknowledge. I think that was a big thing for everyone else knew that America was racist. But for most white Americans, we didn't realize that America was still racist until 2 years ago. Right. And then the BLM happened and everyone was like, there was this big unveiling. And then anyone who was white, they were faced with this choice. Do I acknowledge or do I just keep trying to pull this wool down over my eyes? And I think that there's something really magical about how all throughout America, you have a bunch of people exiting high demand religions and high demand cults like Mormonism who have they've been through a process of realizing that the world that they were told was real was not real, having the destruction that comes from that, and then having to learn how to rebuild literally a shattered life.
Yes.
And so you have hundreds of thousands of ex-Mormons, of ex-evangelicals, of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, of all of these people coming out of these really strict ex-Orthodox Jews, ex-Catholic, like all these really high demand, all-encompassing worldviews. And they've been through the process of, my world is a lie. Holy fuck, what does that mean? I guess I'm going to have to figure out how to make meaning on my own.
Yes.
And we have literally thousands of us right on time for the apocalypse.
Yes. So yeah, the third part of like my project is make it hallowed, which is make it fucking beautiful and sacred. And that's where like art making is. That's cultivate these skills of like, because like I was saying before, it can be really easy to see this devastation and then to just be like, let's throw the whole thing in the garbage. Just let's throw the whole species in the garbage. It's bad. Things have gotten bad. And I would say that's when it's time to take that third step of like, make it hallowed, make it beautiful, find beauty, will that beauty into existence. And then
Yeah, because that's what we are, is we're these powerful dreamers, right? We're these powerful creators.
Yes.
And we literally live in an imagined world that
Right.
we made up. We imagine
I love this.
all of this bullshit that was going on right now. We imagined that. We made that happen. And if we can make that happen, imagine what else we could make.
Yes.
Right? Imagine what we could make if we were more compassionate, if we were more intentional, if we started to imagine a world where everyone gets taken care of and the rights of all are heard, that we actually do the things that we've been paying lip service to for hundreds of years. We actually live that life.
Yeah.
We can do that because we made this world. That's the thing that's again going back to Burning Man. To the thing that was so fascinating to realize out there is that everything out there is created, right? Because it's literally a flat, and then you realize everything everywhere is created.
Yeah, that's the make it wide.
Everything
That's like blow it
everywhere.
Yes.
Everything everywhere, you guys, is made up. We're humans. We live in made up worlds that we made. We made these worlds.
Yeah.
And so
we
that
can
actually
change
puts
it.
us in a position of incredible power because we can unmake them and we can remake them into better worlds. And I think that's the real opportunity that we have in the apocalypse right now is let's make it better.
I would love to read you a quote from yourself that you said on my podcast.
Oh,
It's
hell
my
yeah.
favorite.
I would love this.
It's my favorite. Okay, you said from the mouth of Ben Brown, the Fresh King Benjamin.
The one and only true prophet.
Okay, so this is what you said. There's something very human about the way that we create. We're storytellers. We're myth makers. There's something really powerful about our imagination. The thing that makes us different from other animals is that we can imagine things that aren't true, and then we can make those things true. And I think that really is the creative process, is having this idea of something that could be, and then seeing a way that you could make it actually real. Which
I'm a smart boy.
You are. But also, listen, I was asking you good questions.
You were asking me great questions. And to be totally fair, that idea, I borrowed that idea from Yuval Harari, who's an even smarter boy. But yeah, like that to me is why I'm absurdly optimistic. Yeah. And the reason that I'm absurdly optimistic is that everything that is here, we made. Like everything that's affecting us as humans, we made. It reminds me of, there's one of my favorite memes it's this picture of this kid and his face is in the dirt, like in the mud, and he's like crying and his mouth is, and there's a boot on his face and the boot is just like pushing his face into the mud. And it just says before spiritual awakening. And then then it just zooms out. The next frame is it zooms out a little bit and the kid's hand is in the boot. So he's got his own hand in the boot, shoving his face into the mud. And it says after spiritual awakening. And that's it, right? All of the shit that we're dealing with as a species right now, we made it happen.
Yeah.
So we're not waiting for going back to the second coming, right? We don't need to wait for someone to come save us.
Yeah.
Because number one, they're not coming. And number two, they couldn't if they tried, because we are the authors. We're actually the ones who have the power here. We've always had all of the power. We've always had all the power. And what we've done is that we've, just like we did in Mormonism, right? Mormonism is such a great microcosm, I think, for what's happening in the whole world. Yeah. Because in Mormonism, what happened is that a lot of us, all of us, surrendered our knowing. We surrendered our powerful, creative life force to people who were in charge, and we told them, just tell us what to do and we'll do it.
Yeah. Yep.
We
talk so much about agency in Mormonism, but it's anti-agency. We gave up.
It's very anti-agency. It's obedience. It's getting in line. And that is the exact thing that happened in the broader world, because let's be real, like the climate apocalypse was not caused by all of us. Yeah. It was caused by some of us. there were some people who got stupid rich by selling all these fossil fuels. And those people got stupid rich knowing that what they were doing was bad and then lying to us about it. Like they intentionally obfuscated, which is my favorite word, but I can't ever say it, obfuscated all of the science, all of the things that we knew were going to happen. They created false flags. They did all of this stuff. And so we've surrendered our power to the people in charge, and they have not earned our trust.
Yeah.
And we have to take it back.
I think part of the reason that we feel helpless about this, and I know you and I, we're different. We don't feel helpless. That's why we're having this conversation. But I think it's easy to feel helpless because we have not been taught to cultivate these skills. But they are easily cultivated. Like your brain and your body are designed to do them. Fucking cultivate them. And
it's really easy.
I think it's also people can be told this story, or they can tell themselves this story that's, well, I can't go out and be a totally different person than I am. And I would say you don't have to. One of my favorite ways to think about this is look at everything you're already doing. Maybe stop doing the stuff that you just feel unethical about. But I think most of us, like the job that we're in, the children that we are parents of, the lives that we're living in, probably hopefully more ways than less are in our value systems. So how can we take what we're already doing and just be more creative and be more artful and be more ethical?
Yeah.
Like you don't need to go and learn how to cure cancer, or you don't need to go to Ukraine. If that's where you are and that's like where your very particular motivation takes you, do it. But if you are someone's mom, just be that person's mom in the most artful and ethical and creative way you can. And if you are an elementary school teacher, do that in the most creative way you can. And if you work in middle management, make your middle management job as ethical and humane and innovative as you possibly can.
Yeah, show up where you are. To quote Elder Uchtdorf, bloom where you're planted, right? Like there's a lot of value in recognizing that the world is much smaller. The world is much smaller and much more immediate than we think of it as. And if we're all immediately investing in our communities around us, in the immediate surroundings, and making sure that, hey, the people in my neck of the woods, we're going to be okay. Yeah. We're going to survive this apocalypse okay. If we're all doing that, that creates this whole global ecosystem of us doing that, and then we crush it.
Right. And when we disagree, we have skills to talk about that. We have skills to be like, how does it look to you? How does it look to me? What are the facts? Where are the facts like not definitive? Where are there multiple ways to see it? And then say, okay, well, you work on your project and I'm going to work on my project, and let's keep talking. We just don't, we have not been taught those skills at all. Yeah, which is why I wrote a record about it. It was like, here's some skills.
Here are some skills you should use. You should learn, everybody. Creative skills. Emily, we are coming to pretty close to the end of our time.
All right.
Is there anything? I know, I feel like we got through point one of what you wanted to talk about, but is there any kind of final thoughts or last little insights that you want to share around art and the apocalypse?
I think maybe the crux of it for me, and maybe this is like a perfect summary. Maybe I told you this before, but my patriarchal blessing, which, as you had said in your episode 2, is like your little private prophecy.
Right.
My patriarchal blessing has this line in it that says, God respects truth regardless of where it is found. And that taught me and allowed me, the irony is so thick, but it taught me to receive knowledge and to ask questions without fear. And that has become something that is in many ways like an integral part of my creativity and my creative experience. And I would say the first step is like, when you feel fear, ask more questions. Look for more truth. Don't be afraid of what the answer is going to be. Look for it, find it, take some steps, eat the whale one bite at a time. And just stay present and active and creative in your mind.
I love
and
this.
your actions.
To me, the final thought for me on the subject of art in the apocalypse is just something that I've noticed, which is because I often think of where we live. We live in Utah, right? And to me, Utah, Wyoming, which is where I'm from originally, that feels like the furthest extent of kind of white nationalist America, right? The people who came here injected white supremacist America and kind of like spread across the continent and manifest destiny. The furthest place that they got to was like Utah and up into Wyoming. And so I often see, as I drive around here, it feels like that's the place where you would see the flywheel winding down, right? So that to me looks like I drive around and I'll see like a Dick's Sporting Goods, except it's not Dick's Sporting Goods anymore. It's Ick's Sporting Goods, because that D sign isn't lit anymore and it's never going to be lit again.
Right.
And I see that all throughout this area where it's just like it was like this big push and this big expansion, and now it's settling back. And as it's settling back, it's interesting because you also see nature coming back, nature growing up over these old buildings that have been abandoned, cars abandoned and falling to pieces in everywhere in the field, right? And the other thing that you see that I love is I'm starting to see all of this art being made on the bones of this old world. So people painting murals on the sides of abandoned buildings, people doing graffiti on these old cars, like all of these different ways that we are using art to beautify our spaces, even as our spaces are falling into disrepair, even as our spaces falling into decline, that we can be creative and be beautiful about that. And I think that to me is just such a beautiful example of how humans respond when things go to shit. Yes. Because when things go to shit, we still make art. We're doing it right now.
You and I are doing it right now.
Right now in this conversation, and all of the humans are doing it. And so there's not a lot of fear that I feel. There's actually a lot of hope, because regardless of what happens, we humans are always going to be human, and we're always going to continue to make art and beauty in the places around us, because that's what we do. That's what we've done the whole time.
Yes. Hell yeah. Anyway.
Emily, where could people go to find you if they wanted to follow you?
Yeah, all of my things are on emilymerrillmusic.com. However, beware, my last name does not have an I. It's Merrell. emilymerrillmusic.com.
Rad. Thank you so much for joining me and being my first interview. As always, if you guys want to follow me, I'm at The Fresh King Benjamin on all social platforms. And thanks for joining us on today's episode of Vibing the Apocalypse. Stay safe out there.